Level 1. Petty Revenge. Carlos Sainz Jr. In 2020, McLaren decided Daniel Ricciardo was the bigger name, and Sainz was the movable piece. This came after Sainz had just delivered one of the most complete seasons of his career, finishing 6th in the championship and playing a key role in McLaren's recovery from midfield anonymity. None of that changed the outcome. The decision was already locked in. Sainz handled the exit quietly, but the response came later, and it came on track. Ferrari signed him for 2021, placing him under immediate scrutiny alongside Charles Leclerc, a driver already viewed as the future of the team. The expectation was clear. Sainz would need time. Instead, he settled in immediately. Podiums came early. Consistency followed race after race. He showed adaptability in a Ferrari that demanded precision rather than aggression. Inside the team, trust built fast. By 2022, the payoff arrived at Silverstone, a race shaped by restarts, pressure, and strategic chaos. Sainz stayed composed through every phase, held position when it mattered, and crossed the line to claim his first Formula One victory. Ferrari's first win since 2019. The timing carried weight. McLaren had already accepted that Ricciardo wasn't delivering what they hoped, while the driver they released was standing on the top step in red. Valtteri Bottas. At Mercedes, he delivered championships, podiums, and points on demand, but the label never changed. Reliable, compliant. Number 2. When George Russell was ready, Bottas was the one moved aside. The transition was framed as progress, yet the message was simple. His role had an expiration date. The move to Alfa Romeo in 2022 stripped everything back. No championship pressure, no teammate comparisons, no expectations beyond survival. Bottas arrived as the clear leader, and from the opening races, the difference showed. He qualified aggressively, raced decisively, and scored points immediately. Results that had been rare for the team became routine. In the early part of the season, Bottas often ran closer to the front than cars with far greater resources. More importantly, the way he raced changed the conversation around him. He took ownership of development. He gave feedback. He raced freely without calculating how his performance might be interpreted internally. The calm that followed him throughout the paddock was confidence finally untethered from hierarchy. This wasn't revenge aimed at Mercedes directly. Bottas never needed to beat them wheel to wheel. The point was simpler. Once removed from a role that defined him narrowly, his value expanded immediately. The same driver, the same skill set, a different context, and suddenly the narrative collapsed. Level 2, career reset revenge, Daniel Ricciardo. When he left Red Bull at the end of 2018, the move looked bold. Max Verstappen had become the future, and Ricciardo chose control over being second priority. Renault offered him leadership, money, and a team built around his personality. On paper, it made sense. On track, the results never quite matched the promise. The wins disappeared. The spotlight faded. By the time he landed at McLaren in 2021, Ricciardo was no longer escaping a shadow. He was trying to outrun doubt. The McLaren chapter was brutal. Lando Norris adapted quickly to the car's narrow operating window. Ricciardo never fully did. Qualifying gaps grew. Confidence slipped race by race. Even the stunning Monza win in 2021 felt like an outlier rather than a turning point. By the end of 2022, McLaren paid him to leave. A race winner with 8 victories was suddenly without a seat, watching from the pit wall as a reserve driver. Formula One moved on quickly, as it always does. Ricciardo's revenge wasn't loud. It was survival. Red Bull brought him back quietly as a reserve, not as a savior, but as insurance. When the opportunity came in 2023 to race again with AlphaTauri, later RB, the goal was relevance. Ricciardo showed flashes of the old sharpness, calm radio messages, measured racecraft. The paddock tone softened. He wasn't the carefree superstar anymore. He was a driver, rebuilding credibility one weekend at a time. Career reset revenge doesn't come with trophies. It comes with the simple act of refusing to disappear. Nico Hülkenberg. His exile from Formula One was quiet, almost forgettable. At the end of 2019, he was out. No podiums, no narrative hook. Just a reputation as a solid midfielder in a sport obsessed with highlights. Younger drivers took his place. Time passed. Hülkenberg stayed ready, stepping in as a substitute during the pandemic years, delivering competent performances with no preparation. Still, no seat followed. The grid looked like it had moved on without him. Then Haas called. In 2023, Hülkenberg returned full-time in machinery that few expected to matter. From the first qualifying sessions, he made noise, Q3 appearances, clean laps, ruthless execution on Saturdays. He routinely dragged the car far higher on the grid than its race pace suggested. Teammates rotated. The result stayed the same. Experience punished inexperience. Hülkenberg didn't need podiums to humiliate anyone. He did it by exposing how thin the margin really is at this level. The revenge was clinical. Every strong qualifying lap reinforced the same message. The grid didn't evolve past him. It just forgot what experience looks like when it's sharpened and by absence. Kevin Magnussen. His Formula One career has always moved in sharp bursts. Promoted, dropped, returned. At the end of 2020, Haas cut him loose as the team collapsed into the back of the field. Magnussen left for sports cars, winning races elsewhere while Haas hit rock bottom. By the time they called him back in 2022, expectations were low. The team needed stability. What they got was impact. Magnussen arrived in Bahrain and finished fifth. Haas hadn't looked that competitive in years. The result reset the perception of both driver and team instantly. Throughout the season, Magnussen raced aggressively, unapologetically, and without concern for reputation. In Brazil, he delivered one of the shock moments of the year, taking pole position in wet qualifying. A Haas on pole in modern Formula One. It wasn't luck, but execution in chaos. The comeback didn't lead to sustained glory, but it didn't need to. Magnussen reminded the grid that some drivers don't fade. They wait. Career reset revenge doesn't rewrite history. It interrupts the narrative just long enough to prove it was wrong. Level 3. Team rejection revenge. Pierre Gasly. In 2019, he was dropped into one of the most unforgiving seats in Formula One, expected to match Max Verstappen while learning a car built around a completely different driving style. The results unraveled quickly. Qualifying gaps widened, races slipped away, public confidence drained race by race. By mid-season, Red Bull made its move. Gasly was demoted back to Toro Rosso before the summer break, a decision that carried humiliation more than explanation. In Formula One terms, it looked terminal. Gasly returned to the junior team, stripped of expectations and spotlight. That reset changed everything. Freed from internal comparison, he focused on execution. Strong qualifying laps, clean race management, gradual authority over the team. Results followed quietly at first, then undeniably. By 2020, AlphaTauri found itself in position during a chaotic Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Penalties, safety cars, and strategy mistakes wiped out the usual frontrunners. Gasly stayed clear of trouble, controlled the restarts, and defended with precision. When the checkered flag fell, he had won. The image was stark. A Red Bull cast-off standing on the top step, delivering a victory the senior team couldn't secure that day. The win carried weight beyond points. It reset Gasly's reputation across the paddock. He became a team leader, not a project. Consistency followed in the seasons after, with regular points finishes and measured performances that reinforced trust. The demotion never vanished from his story, but it stopped defining it. Gasly didn't need to return to Red Bull to complete the revenge. He turned rejection into independence, and that was enough. Alex Albon. Promoted rapidly in 2019, he entered the same environment Gasly had left, facing the same challenge. Results came sporadically. Confidence fluctuated. The pressure compounded. By the end of 2020, Red Bull moved on. Now, Albon lost his seat entirely, not even keeping a race drive elsewhere on the grid. For a driver still early in his career, the fall was steep. He spent a year on the sidelines as a reserve driver, watching races rather than shaping them. When Williams offered him a return in 2022, the expectations were minimal. The car was slow. The team was rebuilding. Albon treated the opportunity differently. He focused on detail, extracting performance from situations others wrote off. Points finishes arrived through strategy, tire management, and precise execution. Defensive drives became his signature, holding off faster cars lap after lap. What followed was a steady restoration of reputation. Engineers trusted his feedback. Teammates measured themselves against him. Williams leaned on his consistency during a fragile rebuild phase. Albon didn't chase validation publicly. He earned it over long stints, difficult weekends, and races where finishing 10th felt like a victory. The Red Bull comparison faded. In its place stood a composed, respected driver valued for clarity and control. Level 4, title contender revenge. Fernando Alonso, post-2018 return. He walked away from Formula One at the end of 2018 with his reputation bruised and his relevance questioned. McLaren had collapsed around him. The cars were uncompetitive, the results forgettable, and the narrative hardened fast. He was frustrated, difficult, past his moment. By the time he left, the paddock had quietly decided the sport had moved on. Younger drivers filled the grid, new champions emerged, and Alonso became a punchline in discussions about timing and ego. His return in 2021 didn't arrive with fireworks. Alpine gave him machinery that could survive, not dominate. Alonso treated it like unfinished business. Racecraft sharpened immediately. Starts were aggressive, defenses were ruthless. He picked up points where others bled time, the speed never disappeared, and the awareness felt heightened, as if time away had stripped the noise out of his driving. Then came the real turn. In 2023, Alonso joined Aston Martin. Expectations were modest. The car arrived fast. Alonso arrived faster. Podiums stacked up early in the season. He fought cars that were supposed to be untouchable and made it look routine. Drivers half his age struggled to manage tires and traffic, while Alonso carved through races with precision. The radio tone was calm, the execution relentless. Week after week, the same message echoed across the paddock. The problem had never been him. This wasn't a championship run, but it landed where it hurt. He embarrassed assumptions. He turned age into a weapon, experience into leverage, and doubt into fuel. The joke stopped. The respect returned. Title contender revenge doesn't need a crown. Sometimes it lives in forcing the entire grid to admit they were wrong. Kimi Räikkönen. During his years at McLaren in the early 2000s, the speed was undeniable. Poles came, wins followed, championships slipped away through mechanical failures and reliability disasters that piled up season after season. Races ended on the sidelines instead of podiums. Titles were lost without mistakes being made. The frustration built quietly, without complaint. When McLaren moved on, Räikkönen joined Ferrari, carrying both expectation and doubt. Talent was never the question. Timing was. In 2007, everything aligned. Ferrari entered the season with two strong drivers and a competitive car. The title fight tightened race by race. Points swung violently between Räikkönen, Hamilton, and Alonso. Heading into the final race in Brazil, Räikkönen trailed both rivals. He drove with clarity. No panic, no overreach. He won the race. The others faltered just enough. By a single point, Räikkönen became world champion. It was Ferrari's first driver's title since Schumacher, and it arrived without drama or celebration beyond the moment itself. Kimi walked away, as he always did. Flat voice, minimal words, job done. That championship carried weight far beyond the margin. Years of mechanical heartbreak vanished in one afternoon. The patience paid off. Räikkönen didn't need reinvention or redemption arcs. He waited. Title contender revenge often feels loud and explosive. This one felt inevitable, like the sport finally correcting itself. Level 5. Championship revenge, Jenson Button. He spent most of his early career being underestimated in plain sight. He moved through teams, showed flashes of speed, and built a reputation for smooth driving that never quite translated into fear. In a sport obsessed with aggression, he was labeled gentle. Talented, but not ruthless enough. By the time he arrived at Brawn GP in 2009, expectations barely existed. The team itself was an afterthought, born from the ashes of Honda's sudden withdrawal and held together by last-minute funding. Then the season started, and everything flipped. The Brawn car arrived with a technical advantage that caught the grid flat-footed, and Button took control immediately. Wins stacked up early, calm starts, clean tire management, clinical execution, while chaos unfolded behind him. Rivals scrambled to catch up as regulations were clarified and advantages narrowed. Button didn't panic. He banked points while others chased miracles. By the time the field closed in, the damage was already done. He sealed the championship through composure rather than spectacle. He didn't need to dominate every weekend. He managed the season like a veteran who understood momentum better than hype. Years of being overlooked collapsed into a single conclusion. When the title was secured, the narrative had nowhere to hide. The soft driver had beaten them all, and Formula One had to update its definition of toughness. Nigel Mansell. At Williams, he delivered wins, fought championships, and carried the weight of expectation through some of the most intense seasons of the late 80s. Still, when the opportunity to build around him passed, he was pushed aside. Mansell left Formula One not with closure, but with unfinished business. He crossed the Atlantic and landed in Kart, a move that many viewed as retreat. Mansell treated it as a challenge. In 1993, he won the kart championship as a rookie, beating experienced American open-wheel veterans and proving his adaptability. The message traveled back to Europe quickly. He hadn't faded, he had recalibrated. When Mansell returned to Williams in 1992, the environment had shifted. The car was dominant, yes, but domination still demands precision. Mansell delivered relentlessly. Wins piled up. Poles followed. He wrapped up the championship with races to spare. One of the most commanding title campaigns in Formula One history. The comeback felt less like redemption and more like correction. The driver they let go returned untouchable, leaving no doubt about who had been underestimated. Jacques Villeneuve. He entered Formula One carrying skepticism instead of reverence. His success came from kart, not the traditional European ladder, and that alone placed an asterisk next to his name in the eyes of purists. Speed was acknowledged, belonging was questioned. When he joined Williams, the pressure was immediate, amplified by a title fight that would define his career. The 1997 season became a duel. Villeneuve against Michael Schumacher. Youth against experience. The championship tightened race by race, culminating in a controversial finale at Jerez. When Schumacher attempted to force Villeneuve off track and failed, the championship swung decisively. Villeneuve finished the race and secured the title, while Schumacher was disqualified from the standings entirely. The moment carried weight beyond the points. Villeneuve had beaten the era's benchmark and survived a season defined by scrutiny. The doubts faded. The outsider narrative dissolved. Championship revenge doesn't always require a long wait. Sometimes it arrives in a single defining confrontation, and Villeneuve walked away with the title and the validation that followed. Level 6. Legendary Revenge. Lewis Hamilton. In 2007, he entered Formula One as a rookie and nearly won the championship in his first season. What followed inside McLaren was tension that never fully surfaced publicly, but shaped everything that came after. Team politics hardened, trust fractured, the title slipped away by a single point, and the relationship never recovered. When Hamilton left McLaren for Mercedes in 2013, the move was mocked across the paddock. Mercedes hadn't won a championship in decades. The dominant force of the era was Red Bull. The logic didn't add up. Hamilton stayed patient. The early Mercedes seasons showed flashes without reward. Wins were rare. Reliability failed at key moments. Critics framed the move as wasted potential. Then the regulations changed in 2014, and the long burn finally caught fire. Mercedes emerged with the fastest package, and Hamilton took control immediately. Championships followed in waves. Records fell one by one. Wins, poles, titles. Seasons defined by control rather than chaos. The revenge wasn't loud. It was sustained. Year after year, Hamilton kept delivering, even as teammates changed and pressure shifted. The paddock narrative flipped entirely. The driver, once doubted for leaving McLaren, became the benchmark everyone chased. 7 world championships, over 100 race wins, more poles than anyone in history. The betrayal of 2007 never needed a response. Time handled it. Hamilton's career turned doubt into dominance, and the scale of success erased every early question. Niki Lauda. In 1976, he was leading the championship when everything stopped at the Nürburgring. His Ferrari burst into flames after a violent crash. Lauda suffered severe burns, inhaled toxic smoke, and came close to death. Doctors questioned whether he would survive, let alone race again. The paddock assumed his career was finished. Even if he returned, the edge was gone. That's how the sport usually works. 6 weeks later, he climbed back into a Formula One car. His burns were still healing. His helmet pressed against raw skin. Blood seeped through bandages. He finished 4th in his comeback race. The title fight continued, but the cost was clear. At Fuji, in torrential rain, Lauda withdrew on safety grounds, handing the championship to James Hunt by a single point. Some called it weakness. Lauda never accepted that framing. He came back sharper, more calculated, less willing to gamble with chance. In 1977, he won his 2nd world championship through consistency and control, proving the fire hadn't taken anything from him. And later, after stepping away from the sport, Lauda returned again with McLaren in the 1980s. In 1984, he won his 3rd title by half a point, the smallest margin in Formula One history. He rewrote the meaning of resilience inside Formula One, turning survival into strength. Level 7, GOAT Revenge, Max Verstappen. His revenge began with waiting. From the moment he arrived in Formula One, his speed was obvious, sometimes uncomfortable in how raw it looked. Wins came early, mistakes came too. While Mercedes stacked titles year after year, Verstappen existed in a holding pattern close enough to threaten, too far to break through. Seasons passed where Red Bull built fast cars that fell just short. Races where strategy unraveled. Championships that never really opened up. The message from the top stayed the same. This era belonged to someone else. Then came 2021, and the pressure compressed everything. Verstappen fought Lewis Hamilton race for race in a season that never loosened its grip. Wins traded hands, tempers flared, decisions were questioned publicly and endlessly. When the title was decided in Abu Dhabi, the arguments didn't stop, they multiplied. For months, the championship was debated instead of celebrated. Verstappen held the trophy, but the noise followed him everywhere. The revenge came immediately after. Red Bull delivered a car that worked everywhere, and Verstappen erased uncertainty with repetition. Wins stacked up without controversy. Poles turned into victories. Records fell fast. The margins grew wider. Seasons stopped feeling competitive. Rivals didn't question decisions anymore. They questioned survival. Verstappen raced with clarity and control, dismantling weekends before they could develop drama. Championships followed without resistance. It's Michael Schumacher. His revenge story unfolded slowly, measured in seasons rather than moments. Early success at Benetton brought championships, but it also brought suspicion. Rivals questioned legality. Critics dismissed the achievements. When Schumacher moved to Ferrari in 1996, the decision was ridiculed. Ferrari hadn't won a driver's title since 1979. The team was disorganized, politically heavy, and fragile under pressure. Schumacher walked into a rebuild that many believed was impossible. The early years were brutal. Mechanical failures, strategic mistakes, championships lost to faster cars. Public doubt grew louder with every near miss. Schumacher kept working, testing endlessly, shaping the team around discipline and preparation. Progress arrived gradually, almost invisibly. And then, in 2000, the breakthrough came. Schumacher delivered Ferrari's first driver's title in over 2 decades, ending a drought that defined the team's identity. What followed was domination. 5 consecutive championships from 2000 to 2004. Records shattered. Races controlled from the opening lap. Seasons finished early. Ferrari became untouchable, and Schumacher became the standard by which greatness was measured. The years of doubt disappeared under the weight of results. The waiting paid off fully, without compromise. His revenge was aimed at disbelief itself. He turned the most criticized rebuild in Formula One history into the most dominant run the sport has ever seen. And that's it. Now, to you, who do you think got the best last laugh in Formula One? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.